Welcome to another Sabbath School lesson. This is lesson number 5, Resurrections Before the Cross. Let's go ahead and dive into the memory verse for this week. It's taken from John chapter 11, verse 25 and 26. And it says, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die forever. Do you believe this? So in general, you've got about 6 main, I should probably say, stories that happen here. 3 are in the New Testament done by Jesus, 3 resurrections, 3 are in the Old Testament done by Elijah and Elisha, and then 1 done by technically Jesus in the Old Testament. So let's go ahead and dive right into this to kind of brief you over this. What I'll do is I'll go briefly through some of the stories that took place, and then I'll give you his main 1 or 2 points at the end. We'll dive right into the profound meditation. So let's go. The first one that he opens up with is going to be the resurrection of Moses. That's spoken of in the book of Jude. Typically, the author doesn't spend too much time there, but the point is that there is a resurrection, and it doesn't matter what the devil does. He can't stop you from being resurrected back to God if you've been faithful to him. The other 2 stories that are going to take place is going to be in the book of 1st and 2nd Kings. This is done by Elijah and Elisha. Stories are somewhat similar. The main point between the 2 is that you have basically 2 women who are not Israelites, but basically end up having their sons resurrected from the grave because they were so, you could say, hospitable to prophets. So they housed Elijah in one story, and a woman housed Elijah or Elisha in the other story. Elijah, Elisha. I get them mixed up all the time. Goodness gracious. So basically the point is they showed hospitality to both of the prophets in some way, shape, or form. And God was bringing blessings to their households, and all of a sudden their sons ended up dying. And in the story, you'll find that both of these sons were resurrected. So these stories are somewhat similar. You can find some patterns in there. We're not going to spend much time on it right now, but just letting you know, that's the brief summary for that. As you move forward, you'll find the 3 stories inside the New Testament in which Jesus actually does some resurrections. So one story is going to be from the widow of Nain. This is going to be the story when Jesus is passing by through a village. He sees a woman walking out. She's a widow, and he sees that she has 1 son, and that son is unfortunately dead. They're carrying the son out in an open casket. Jesus comes by, and he tells everybody to stop, places his hand on the casket, tells the woman, don't worry, and raises her son back from the dead. So this is a pretty powerful story. Make sure you check into it. Pretty significant and powerful because this woman did not ask Jesus to resurrect her son, yet she received a resurrection from Jesus. So that's why this one is a little bit different. The other stories in the Old Testament with the 2 ladies, they actually kind of came and appealed to the prophets for resurrection. Author throws that in, and that's a point that he does bring out. The other 2 that happen is the story of Jairus, who's the synagogue leader. He runs off to Jesus and basically asks for his daughter to be healed. She's basically on the verge of death. Jesus is actually crossing on the path to get there. He's kind of delayed for a period of time, and unfortunately his daughter ends up dying. Everyone's like, don't bother the teacher anymore. It doesn't matter. Jesus still presses forward to the man's house and resurrects the daughter from the dead. And then lastly, you have Lazarus, which most scholars believe is Jesus, you could probably say, greatest resurrection during his lifetime. And of course, you know the story essentially of that. Mary and Martha's brother ends up dying. They call out to Jesus to come and actually save their brother because he's super sick. Jesus doesn't get there in time intentionally, and Lazarus ends up dying. He waits 4 days and then resurrects him from the dead. So these are in essence the 6 stories that you're going to see. 3 in the Old Testament, 3 in the New Testament. The main key points the author is really trying to bring out here is very simple. 1, there is a resurrection. And again, the devil can't stop God from raising his righteous back from the dead. That's one of the main key points here. But on the flip side, the author's trying to also paint a picture and say most people are not going to raise people from the dead. So what can we do for orphans, widows, and those that have felt the pain of death? Now, it's time for the profound meditation. Okay, so our profound meditation is going to be taken from 1 Kings chapter 17 and verse 17 through 18. This is actually going to get into the story of Elijah. He actually went to the woman of Zarephath, and this is the woman who actually kind of showed hospitality to him. He stayed with her. Everything was going great. Her house was being blessed, and next thing you know, her son ended up dying. But I want you to read these couple of verses here because there's something that's very interesting about this that I'll point out. It says this: "Now it happened after these things that the son of the woman who owned the house became sick, and his sickness was so serious that there was no breath left in him. So she said to Elijah, 'What have I to do with you, O man of God? Have you come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to kill my son?'" Now think about this. Elijah is perceived as kind of a blessing to her initially, right? And now, because of the tragedy of her son dying, Elijah is now perceived as some sort of judge over her life. And the question is, why does she seem to think that Elijah is now all of a sudden this judge that's condemning her? The number one thing that can negatively change your perspective of someone is when you feel that you've lost something valuable because of them. I want to say that again. The number one thing that can negatively change your perspective of someone is when you feel like you have lost something valuable because of them. Now, this woman is thinking that she ends up losing her valuable son because of the prophet Elijah. And now her whole perspective of Elijah has completely changed. And one kind of thing that happens with us is when we perceive that someone in our life is the reason why we lost something, whether it be a friend, whether it be like a teacher or a person at a job, or whether it be a spouse, or whether it be even God. When you perceive that there's someone in your life that because they're in your life and their position in your life, you've lost something because of them, you end up having a changed negative perspective of them. It ultimately shifts your entire relationship with them. Now, the good thing is that in the story, this woman actually gets her son back. So the thing or the person that's valuable in her life actually comes back to her. But this doesn't happen for all of us. You know, it's like we all go through something in which we lose something and we don't always get the chance to get that back. And especially if you think another person is responsible of it, you're going to have a hard time having a relationship with that person. So here's a question that I have for you. How do you find a way to have a good relationship with a friend, spouse, or God when you feel like you've lost something because of them? How do you find a way to have a good relationship with a friend, spouse, or God when you feel like you've lost something because of them? I'm Oswald, and this is Profound Meditations, Sabbath School Summary.